Stenhouse with the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity is here to talk with a very public piece of legislation that has been in the news a lot. This is the Hairbraider freedom legislation. As I was telling folks before, this is going to be a very workplace-centric day, but this is something you've been working on for a while. And not just at the center. This has a diverse group of stakeholders. So tell us again about the hearing today, and could 2018 be the year?
I hope so. You know, we have a Senate hearing today on a bill that would exempt hair braiders who conduct a very safe, just twisting of hair. It's kind of more like an art form. And this bill would exempt them from the current regulations that force them to go through thousands of hours of training, spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on that training just to get a license in order to legally work. I mean, you shouldn't have to get permission from the government to work in this very safe vocation. So we're having the Senate bill today hearing. Tuesday we had the House hearing. Last year it passed the House unanimously, but the Senate failed to act. I'm glad we're at least having a hearing this year.
So pushing on the Senate side, talk with us about this diverse coalition of folks. Again, this is bipartisan. This is across the aisles. So talk with us a little bit about who you've heard from and who's really backing this.
Sure. So this is not a partisan issue. This is really a special interest issue. If you crony corporatism, this is what it is. You have a group of established hair salons and cosmetologists that just don't want competition. So they put these onerous licensing requirements out there as a way to block it. So we know that people on the left and those of us on the right both support this. It's being done on a national basis. Our center is in the middle of a push for occupational licensing and regulatory reform anyway. And I think this hair braider freedom issue is really the poster child for, unfair and unnecessary and onerous occupational licensing burdens. So it's really it's been the symbolism of our occupational licensing push now for 3 years.
For 3 years. And talk with us a little bit as well. We've heard from the governor. We've heard from the speaker. This is really, again, reducing red tape is something that both of them have spoken to. Would this be something that you would say, if they're advocating for it, this would be right in their wheelhouse?
Exactly. The Speaker of the House in the opening remarks of this year's General Assembly says, I want to reduce regulatory red tape. This is a great way to start, this bill right here. There's only a very narrow group of people who, by the way, are influential. They've hired, a very influential lobbyist. They're working very hard to protect their profits. We think hair braiders should have the freedom to work in our state.
Do you have a sense of the number of people who are going to turn out today to testify?
More than Tuesday. I know that. Testimony got a little heated Tuesday, so I think both sides probably went back and said we need to bring some more warriors with us. I hope there is no war, by the way. We need to have just a good, open, and rigorous debate.
So it got heated. I mean, how heated did it get?
Well, it got heated where the chairman had to call a timeout in the middle of testimony. He said we need everybody to settle down, and then there was a little heated yelling out in the hall afterwards, some claims of physical contact that, by the way, didn't happen. But again, that's just indicative of how emotional people are. Some people really want to fight for the right for low-income mothers to have a chance to earn some extra money doing hair braiding. And there are other people, understandably, very passionate about protecting their industry. So you can understand it.
Well, I'll tell you, I was up here a couple weeks ago, Mike, there was some gun legislation. They have both gun control and the gun rights folks, and things got pretty heated. This sounds like this would probably be right up there with folks. I mean, it's as you said, a very personal issue.
It is personal. It's people's career, but I do expect today in the Senate I think everybody probably learned their lesson, and I think we'll have a much more level-headed discussion today.
So passing the House last year, so the focus, I'm sure, is the Senate, to see that it gets out of the Senate. This is the goal of 2018.
Yeah, last year the Senate bill, there was no Senate bill per se. The bill that got passed out of the House went to the Senate that never got acted on. This year there are 4 or 5 sponsors, including a number of lady senators, who are sponsoring a Senate version of this bill. So I think we have a lot more momentum this year. I hope the hearing goes well. Again, the House passed it unanimously. Republicans and Democrats came together. I see no reason why the same thing won't happen in the Senate.
And you just put out a release today, a prominent professor talking about the hair industry. It was actually on GoLocal. Again, you said this transcends Rhode Island.
Yeah, and that release was from the Rhode Island Families Coalition, which is evidence of the broad philosophical agreement on this. Ray Rickman, who you know very well, is going to talk about that statement from the African-American professor at Vassar College who actually, believe it or not, he studies the history of barberology. And he goes back and made the statement, that 100, 125 years ago, a lot of these licensing laws did have racial intent. Now, nobody is suggesting there's any racial intent and anything's happening today. We just want to remove these licenses, for pure free market access purposes. But there is a little history here, and I'll be interested to see how that unfolds at the hearing.
And we'll see as well, Ray Rickman does give his big view on GoLocal on Thursdays. We'll have to tune in for 4 o'clock to see if that's what he gives today.
I hope so.
But Mike, I appreciate your taking the time. I know you've got a national spokesperson coming in here to talk, who's going to testify.
So you're going to bring in my friend who's up from Washington, D.C., and she's going to give even more good stuff on this.
I appreciate Mike Stenhouse with the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity. Wanted to talk just about hair braiding today.
Absolutely.
I appreciate getting you here on GoLocal Live before you go to the Senate hearing. Just had Mike Stenhouse on with the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity. Again, this is the hair braider freedom legislation, and it's a mouthful. And so we've heard from a lot of Rhode Islanders on this, but you're up from D.C. to testify today. Talk with us about coming up to Rhode Island.
Absolutely. So Rhode Island requires natural African-style hair braiders to obtain 1,500 hours of totally irrelevant cosmetology training. That's coursework that starts at $15,000 to learn practices that they reject using heat, caustic chemicals. But braiding isn't cosmetology whatsoever, and that's why 23 other states have already recognized this fact and don't require braiders to have a cosmetology license. And we're hoping that Rhode Island joins that growing list.
So 23 states already. You're here, again, testifying today. How many other states, in addition to Rhode Island, are now making this push this year as well? Are we seeing this around the country?
Absolutely. The braiding reform is sweeping the country. Right now, Vermont is considering a very similar bill. There's a few other states where things are still in the works, but states are eager to get rid of this red tape, this burden on an industry dominated by African-American women who brought over a beautiful cultural art form with them. And they're just being kept out of business, being blocked from the first rung of the economic ladder. And people on both sides of the political spectrum, from the Obama administration to conservative groups like the Heritage Foundation, all agree these types of laws need to go.
And so talk with us a little bit about coming up from D.C. and being with the Institute for Justice. Talk with us a little bit about your organization and why this brought you here today.
Absolutely. The Institute for Justice is the national public interest civil liberties law firm that advocates for the right to earn an honest living across the country. One of our very first clients was actually an African-style hair braider in Washington, D.C., so we've been working on this issue for over 25 years. Very close to us. It is about the braiders, and it's also much more broadly about the right to earn an honest living in Rhode Island and beyond. Occupational licensing only creates barriers to entry into occupations traditionally suited to people on the first rung of the economic ladder, and it needs to be reformed.
So did you pretty much just go through all your testimony that you'll be giving today at the Senate? Are there additional...
Can I go home now?
No, are there additional points that folks should know as they're watching this and heard of this? It's been in the news a lot. But again, you've kind of gone over the points. Are there any that you didn't touch upon that you're going to be talking about before the Senate?
I think it's important to note that the legislature likely never even intended to regulate braiders as cosmetologists in the first place. The statute doesn't even mention braiding. So there really shouldn't be this much opposition to it. But you see industry insiders worried about losing some profits. That's what this is motivated by. Our research shows there are no health and safety concerns caused by the unlicensed practice of braiding. So we're looking forward to the Senate hearing this afternoon.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come on live. We did have Mike Stenhouse with the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity, again, talking about this being a bipartisan, across all spectrums issue. We're going to be keeping a close eye on this. Again, this is the hair braider freedom legislation. Christina, I appreciate your taking the time. I'll let you go around the corner, and we'll welcome our next guest in here. Pleased to welcome Misty Harris into the studio here, because you're going to be testifying today about this legislation, again, to deregulate the industry, to not have to go through all the hours, all of the money to do what you're looking to do for your employment. So talk with us a little bit about your hair braiding experience and why you're here today.
Okay. Well, as you see, my hair is done now. I get my hair done every month. It's considered a protective style that I get done due to the fact that in 2010, I was diagnosed with SLE lupus, and I lost my hair at that time. And because of that, I decided to go natural with no chemicals, no relaxers, no hair dryers, anything. And I began to get my hair braided. And at that time is where I noticed that all my hair would grow. And so at that point, I just begin to do that. Every month I do it. It's a protective style. There's no harm to it. I haven't lost any hair. I actually looked up alopecia. Alopecia is an autoimmune disease, which is exactly what lupus is. It's an autoimmune disease. So that's how you can lose your hair, and in such sense, it's not.
So this was a health issue for you.
Yes.
And so, as you said, growing back, a protective style, if you will, and you get it done monthly.
Monthly, yeah.
And when people are doing the hair braiding style, who does it?
A friend of mine, her name is Fanta. She does my hair for me. She's very good, no tension. She, takes her time. And she just tells me certain things I can do, what kind of products I can use as far as like, a conditioner or something. But that's about it. Very less maintenance.
Does she know that is she testifying today as well?
She just had a baby, so she can't be here, unfortunately. But I did reach out to her, and she is, she supports this 100%. It's just sad that, a lot of people couldn't be here due to the short notice of, this, and a lot of people they don't know about it.
Yes.
So
again, we're bringing awareness to this. We had Mike Stenhouse, we had Christina Walsh, and I wanted you to come in again to talk a little bit about this, because one of the things that we heard from the opposition, if you will, was that somehow hair braiding could be damaging to hair, and you're saying that's not the case.
No, that's not the case at all, and I'm a living witness of that. Like I said, I get it done all the time, different hairstyles all the time. You'll see this today, then tomorrow you'll see something different. It's just, and it's a form of art too, and a culture. This isn't our background. African Americans have been doing this for years. So if this was such harmful, we would be all walking around bald-headed. And this is not the case. This is very a good protective style. It's now been considered a protective style, and a lot of people are gearing towards that because of the heat and the chemicals that they have used in the past, that they noticed that is damaging their hair.
So that's more damaging. Braiding is not, and you're here to tell your story, to say, hey, this is why I'm supporting this hair braider freedom legislation. Have you heard from the braiders again about what they're expected to go through now? All the other cosmetology sort of hoops and things that they have to do, and it's just focused on hair braiding. Should they have to go through that, in your opinion?
No, they shouldn't. No, especially when you've been doing it for years. Your mom braided your hair when you was younger. Now we braid our hair. And it's been passed down. This is talent. This is something, like I said, that's just from the heart. You have to want to do it. You have to know, in your heart that this is something that you can do. And I don't think you should have to be mandated to go to school to learn that technique. That's just something that's passed down generation to generation.
So are you looking forward to making your case in front of the hearing today?
Absolutely.
Misty, where do you live? Where's home?
I live in Cranston, was born and raised in Providence, Rhode Island.
Okay, up here at the State House today for the hair braider freedom legislation. Again, we've heard from people across the spectrum on this. It's an issue that a lot of folks are paying attention to. We really appreciate your coming here before the hearing today. Misty Harris, thank you
Nice
so
to meet
much.
you.